Is it bad to ask a seller for a closing cost credit? Let's discuss. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We're the Hatch Homes Group and it is our Monday housing market update. This week we want to talk about closing costs. So is asking for a closing cost credit bad? Well, in the pandemic market, we weren't really seeing very many buyers getting closing cost credit, but right now, I was just looking at a realtor forum where another realtor proposed a question to lenders and real estate agents of how often are you seeing closing costs concessions right now? And it was really eye-opening to see that the majority of transactions were getting some kind of closing cost credit. Now, there's different reasons for that and different things to think about. So we thought it'd be really helpful to break it down. So Randolph, what are closing cost credit, and are there different words for closing cost credit that people might recognize?
Absolutely. So there are different words for seller concessions and closing costs. Basically, the umbrella of it is the repair costs, right?
Yeah.
And buying down the interest rate is the most popular one these days.
So it's buyers asking for the seller to credit them towards their closing costs, whether that be a rate buy down, something that they need to do for a repair and they want to keep cash in their pocket, or maybe they just literally only have money for their down payment and they do not have money for their actual closing costs, which some buyers actually don't know that you have a down payment and closing costs, especially first time home buyers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's what I've been working on with a lot of these buyers and explaining to them, hey, we don't have to worry about the interest rate. We can actually have the seller help with buying down the interest rate. What they're at like 7%, 7.5%. We can potentially get them down to roughly closer to 6 to maybe 5.85%.
Yep. Some really important things to understand with seller concessions is you're essentially just offering the seller less for their home. If the home is, $500,000 and you ask for $15,000 in closing costs, whether that's to buy down your rate or to just cover your closing costs, that's just offering them less money essentially in their eyes.
Yeah, and some things to think about, like especially if you're a seller. We worked with a lot of sellers who sometimes have a negative reaction to a buyer asking for closing cost credit. Most of those sellers are people that like just didn't have experience with asking for a credit when they bought their house. So they look at it and they're like, I have so many closing costs as a seller. Why would I pay the buyer's closing costs? And so that's always a conversation that we'll have to have of like, hey, sellers, don't be offended by that. It's very common. It's a great way actually for buyers to basically finance some extra cash to buy your home. So let's look at the net. We're looking at the net price to you. So if I sent a seller an offer, hey, this offer is at this price minus the credit, which is an actual like purchase price of this. Let's not look at the credit because it's just a lower offer. Let's look at that. Unless the buyers went over list price to compensate, which does happen. So let's talk about that a bit in terms of multiple offer situations. So if you don't absolutely need the credit and you're in a multiple offer situation, that it can help you to not ask for it. And the reason why is sellers, when you have multiple offers, they want to sell to the buyer that is the most solid, that would pose the less risk to them. And even though asking for a closing cost credit might not pose a huge risk, well, when you think about it, if you have to go over list price to get your offer accepted, and then even more over list price to compensate for your closing cost credit, that home has to appraise for that price. And it's not really doing the seller anything to have the price be that high when it's just a credit. So we have to make sure, will the home appraise for that price to compensate it? So that's definitely a determining factor in getting your offer accepted. A lot of sellers want to sell to the buyer that they think is the most solid as well. So sometimes I've had this happen where a seller's like, well, multiple offers, this buyer doesn't need a closing cost credit. They can afford the house without me giving them cash. So in their head, they think, oh, like that's just a more solid buyer. So these are all things that are navigatable, especially us on the buyer's agent side when we're really fighting for our clients. We, really try to make the argument why you're a solid buyer, even though you need the closing cost credit. But things to consider.
Right. So bottom line, no, they're not bad. You just kind of need to understand and be aware of how they're going to affect your offer in that situation. You need to just have clarity over what you can and can't do, and also just work closely with us as your agent with that house to know what the condition is, to see if we can get it accepted or not. So bottom line, no, they're not bad. You just need to know how they're going to affect your offer in that specific situation. So like and subscribe, share this with some friends, and see you next time.